everyone, welcome back. So as promised, this will be a little practice to help us mobilise the spine and the areas around the spine, so the shoulder blades, rib cage, pelvis. And we'll do this rather than seated, we'll do it with full contacts of the body with the floor. So these will be our hands and knees, or maybe our elbows and knees, elbows and feet maybe, hands and feet, and then just the feet. So we'll work our way up to standing. Of course, as we try each exploration, if something doesn't feel right or comfortable in your body, then don't do it, back off, or go to another, try another variation or modification. Also, because we'll be spending a little time on the wrists, just be really sensitive to what your needs are there, and indeed on the knees. So before we get to hands and knees, let's just warm up the wrists. So if you bring your arms in front of you, so the hands remain at shoulder height, and we're going to open and close the hands, and see if you can open the palms and the fingertips really wide, so that they're like sort of spiders, spider legs. Hopefully no one's got arachnophobia. Okay, and then we're going to keep that sense of really opening and closing, but could we go a bit faster? So opening and closing, and maybe already you've started to feel a little bit tired in the forearms especially, but maybe even in the shoulders, around the neck. So try and keep some softness around the neck and the jaw and the face, but keep opening and closing the hands, seeing if you can do a few more, maybe 10 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Maybe 5 more. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And rest down. Oh, shake it out. Flick water off your wrists. Okay, give your shoulders a little shrug. Okay, so you'll probably be already feeling the heat in the forearms there. If you do have wrist issues or repetitive strain injury from overuse, I think a lot of us are feeling overuse of the thumbs at the moment. A lot of swiping going on, a lot of scrolling and so on our smartphones. So this is really good for strengthening the forearms and up into the shoulders and all of the phalanges, the bones, the connective tissue around the bones of your fingers. Okay, so let's come on to the hands and knees then, and if you want to take a blanket underneath your knees, just give it a little extra support. I've got 2 mats, so I'm going to stay with just the 2 mats today, but by all means, if you want extra support underneath your knees, take a blanket. Maybe you're on carpet at home or a rug and a mat, so this adds a little extra support anyway. We don't want so much support that we feel, or kind of squidginess that we feel unstable, but we want enough, obviously, that the joints don't hurt. Okay, the other great thing with the blanket is, if, again, coming back to the wrists, is we can take a bit of pressure out of the wrist by making a little ledge with the blanket. You kind of fold it as high as you need, and then have the heels of your hands resting on the ledge and the fingertips coming off. So you can play around with that. If you don't feel like you need a blanket, or you don't have a blanket, then you could try fists on the floor. Yeah, so then the joint at the wrist is not flexed. Okay, I'm going to have my palms on the floor. If you're having palms on the floor, then we're going to think about all the connections, that the points of contact that we have with the floor, really thinking about connecting there. So I'm going to broaden through the palms of my hands and broaden through the fingers and the thumbs and think about bringing the finger and thumb base down onto the floor as well. So it's just not all my weight pouring into my wrists and then my hands are just kind of hanging out. They're really active. Okay. And then so wrists somewhere underneath the shoulders. You might bring them a little bit further forward, just to bring, again, a little bit of that flexion out of the wrist. And then knees somewhere underneath the hips. So find out what works for you. You want enough support so that the body feels supported by these 4 points of contact with the floor. But you don't want you kind of want enough that we're not sort of saggy in the middle, sort of hanging out there. But you don't want so much space between that you don't feel supported, and you don't want it so closed that you can't move. So finding the place that works for you. And I like to have my toes tucked, but you could maybe point the toes. Again, see what works for you. And with the toes tucked, then think about broadening into the balls of the feet. So you can really feel the contact that the balls of the feet and the toes have with the mat or the floor. If your toes are pointed, if you prefer that, then similar principle, the tops of the feet pressing down into the floor. Okay, and then just relax through your spine, relax through your head and neck. If you're watching this video, then try to have the video maybe in front of you so you're not turning your head all the time like I'm doing. I'm going to stop turning my head now. So we start to feel maybe a little bit of length through the spine. So locate your tailbone in your mind's eye. It's at the end of your spine, the coccyx, where our tail used to be. And then the top of the neck joining to the back of the skull, the nape of the neck. And see just with your mind's eye if you can take your awareness just a few times up and down through the spine. Perhaps with just your attention, physical awareness in the body. And indeed, you could do this with your eyes closed, and you could do this whole practice with your eyes closed if you wanted to. Hopefully my instruction will be clear enough. Okay, so just becoming acquainted with that middle place. And now let's start to mobilize the spine. So I'm going to start by tilting my tailbone up towards the ceiling and then letting my belly drop. And as I do that, I come into a little back bend and my head wants to raise. So raise my head and my neck. Raise my head rather. And then I'm going to draw my tailbone away from my head, coming into a back bend, a forward bend, sorry. Finding length at the back body. Okay, so the tailbone lifts. We find length in the front body, a little back bend, maybe lengthen through the throat, lift the head, and then drawing the tailbone down, finding a forward bend, lengthening the back body. And you might like to do this really slowly, as I'm doing, or you might like to kind of move through this quite quickly. Just see where your body wants to go. This is a really nice thing to do kind of first thing in the morning. So we're just waking up the spine and waking up the areas around the spine. So it might be that you can feel your rib cage moving as well here. Certainly your shoulder blades. And if you're familiar with this, you'll know that we call this cat and cow. If you've done some Pilates, I think they use the same thing. And so this would be the cat. It's like a scaredy cat or an angry cat. And then you can make sound effects if you like. And this is the cow. I don't know, I guess because their sort of haunches are quite high. And they have this little saggy kind of spine or belly off the spine. I'm not sure. I don't know how I'm not sure how it came to be the cow. Cows are lovely. So just exploring your cat and cow, and it might be that it feels very intuitive for the breath to breathe as you move in a particular way. So maybe you breathe in on the back bend and breathe out on the forward bend. See how that feels. Close your, open your mouth if you wanted to. Maybe you'll try breathing in instead through the forward bend and out on the back bend. Seeing how that feels. If you start to feel lightheaded, open your eyes and don't take so many breaths, so many deep breaths. And then let your breath just guide the movement wherever it wants to go. Okay, so you might wiggle your hips, waggling your tail, maybe drawing some circles in your hips. Maybe a figure of 8 with your tail, is that possible? And then it might be that you can really feel like, oh, actually I kind of want to get into the side body more. So you lengthen shoulder away from hips on one side and shorten it on the other, and then change sides. So now you're really moving in the pelvis and the rib cage. Okay, let's have a break off the hands, off the wrists for a moment. Give them a shake. Give the shoulders a little shrug if you want to. Open the mouth. Release any tension that might have accumulated. Okay, now seeing how it feels to bring elbows onto the floor. So now we're in elbows and knees. And be careful here not to bring the elbows too close to the knees. If they're kind of here, you're not going to get so much movement through the spine, through the torso. So make sure there's space. So again, elbows resting underneath the shoulders. And then again, similar things. So just exploring your cat and cow here. Cat and cow on elbows. I don't think either of those animals have elbows. I don't know what they're called, those joints. Maybe they are called elbows, who knows? And what you might notice here as you move through your forward bend and back bend is that we can really start to get into the shoulder blades and the space around the shoulders. So be careful not to hold on in the neck and the head too much here. So let the head move freely. If we kind of try and keep the head still, then you're doing these sorts of elbow push-ups, which is great, and we're mobilizing the shoulder blades, which is great, but just let your head maybe see what it feels like to just move the head as well. And then you might move your tail again, wagging your tail, big circles, figures of 8. And then again, having a little break if you want to. If you're quite happy, please feel free to continue. Okay, and then elbows on the floor again, underneath the shoulders. And then this time, if your toes aren't already tucked, tuck your toes. And then see what it feels like. See how this goes. If you've got neck and shoulder injuries or kind of real, severe compression or tightness, then this might not be for you. But see how it goes, maybe to lift the knees away from the floor. And then we start to feel the weight is going through the shoulders much more now. So make sure you relax your head. And then if this feels okay, you might bend and lengthen in alternate legs. You might walk your feet in quite close, so the bum goes really high. You bend your knees a lot, take the weight out, lift the legs, just have a move and a groove around there. And then you might walk your feet back and lower your hips slightly for a kind of elbow plank type situation. And this can get quite tiring quite quickly, so you might stay there for a couple of breaths, or maybe just half a breath, and then walk the feet back in. Rest the knees down, come off the shoulders, give your shoulders a break. Okay, and then the fourth and final one of these is hands and feet. So we'll bring the hands back onto the floor and have the toes tucked. And then we're going to bring the buttocks back to the heels. So you really feel that broadening into the balls of the feet, into the toes. And you can feel your arms lengthening here. Okay, and then is it possible to lift your knees and lift your hips? Keep the bend in the knees as you lift your hips up and you lengthen your spine. So it might be that your rib cage, your belly is touching your thighs here. And again, bending and lengthening through the backs of the legs. Walking out your dog. And then perhaps you'll walk your feet back. And again, bring your hips down to see what a high plank feels like for you today. If you're really feeling the high plank, maybe you'll separate the feet slightly. So you've got a wider kind of base. And then you could see what it feels like to bring one hand across to the opposite shoulder. And then do the other one. And as you do this, try not to lift and twist too much in the hips. See if you can keep the hips level to the floor. And maybe do that a couple of times if you're finding that particularly enjoyable. Okay. And then bring the hips back up. Walk your feet. And then just walk your feet and your hands around. So you're really exploring your downward facing dog. This inversion as we're bringing the hips above the heart or the heart above the head. So perhaps you'll just play around with your feet on the floor where your feet are. You could walk your feet close to your hands. You could walk your hands around. Maybe you'll come off your mat if you're on a mat. You'll just walk around the space that you're in. Notice how the different textures feel underneath your hands and feet. Notice what it feels like to explore space in this way. It's quite often that we just explore space with our eyes, with our hearing, those kind of very mental sensory experiences. And what's it like for you to explore space with touch and spatial awareness? Okay, perhaps from hands and knees, you might bring your knees down a little and hover your knees just a few inches away from the floor. Starting to feel maybe something switching on in the thighs, in your belly, heat's building. Stuff happening across the upper back, your shoulders. Is it possible from here to walk a hand forward and then the opposite foot forward without tilting your hips too much? Walking, walking. I've run out of space already. So walking maybe up and down your space, exploring what it feels like to be cat-like. And that gets tiring quite quickly, so we can shake it off. the wrists and the shoulders. But you might feel a little bit of heat building already in your body. Doesn't take long. Okay, let's come back to hands and knees. Sorry, hands and feet to the down dog. Have a few moments play in your down dog if you want to. Perhaps you'll, raise legs up, twist in the hips and so on. Okay, and then from here, so if you have the feet at the back edge of your mat, we're going to walk our hands back towards our feet. And then rest in a floppy forward bend. So you could have your legs really bent here, resting your belly, your rib cage on your thighs. Feeling the length and that decompression in your spine. You might be spending, if you're working from home, you might be spending a lot of time sitting. This is just a really nice way. You could do this anytime just to decompress your spine from a lot of sitting. Of course, if you feel dizzy at any point, if you're pregnant, rest your elbows on your thighs so that we keep the space in the belly, in the diaphragm, to be able to breathe as deeply as possible. Okay, and then from your floppy forward bend, you're going to slowly start to roll up through the spine. You might have your eyes closed here if you don't feel dizzy. And can you notice as you roll up through your spine, is it possible to feel each vertebra? Don't worry if not, because we're going to do this a few times. So, a couple of options here. We're going to roll up and down to stand, up and down to the floor. And I realise you can't see me well. Let me just try and adjust this. Oh, okay. So a little bit better. All right. So we're going to roll down to the floor, and the option is to either come into down dog, either stay in the forward bend, rest hands on elbows, come forward into a high plank, or do none of those. So completely up to you, but we're just seeing if we can really feel through the spine here. So we drop our chin down towards the chest, softening your knees, but not too much. Softening in the knees, let your arms dangle forward, rolling down. And feel free to pause anywhere on the way down that feels like it needs a bit of extra time or space. And then, so as I say, you might stay in your forward bend if that feels like somewhere you want to rest a while. Perhaps you would prefer hands on the elbows on the knees. Or perhaps when you get to the floor, you'll kind of pad the hands forward and come into a down dog, or maybe come forward all the way into a high plank. Reaching your heels away from the crown of your head. And then slowly walking your hands back. Coming back to the forward bend, and then slowly rolling up. And then just doing that as many more times as you like. I'm going to do it a couple more times. And as I do it, I'm going to notice what my feet feel like on the floor. Can I really maintain connection between the soles of my feet and the floor. I'd say take at least 2 breaths to roll all the way up, but maybe you'll take 3 or even 5, 4. What I'm trying to do when I come back from my high plank is, rather than go straight back to the down dog, which you could also absolutely explore, is I'm trying to keep the sense of weight through my hands. So it's a slightly different experience in your body. And then rolling up. And notice as you come up to stand just what your body feels like now on the floor, you know, the feet, etc. And sorry, my head was cut off from those standing, from the standing place. But hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of just how we can really easily mobilise the spine, the rib cage, the pelvis, and really feel that connection with the ground as we do so. What else was I going to say? Yeah, so of course, take anything that you want from this practice. There's no need to do it all. Feel free to explore, experiment in your own kind of space, in your own time. You can spend 5 minutes doing it. You could spend 15 or 20. Like it's one of those things that it's quite nice to luxuriate in, but also if you just wanna, if you've got those, 5 minutes between shooting off emails or whatever, take the time to move your body, get the blood flowing, get your oxygen levels up again. We know that moving the body obviously increases oxygen, and then the oxygen in the brain helps us feel more awake and so on. I'll do a little practice for that as well, for kind of just those maybe 5 or 10 minute breaks that we get in between our work schedule. So stuff that we can do at home, stuff that we can kind of do little and often to keep us keep our energy levels up during the day, and to keep us with a bit more focus, maybe help us with concentration, things like that. Okay, thank you so much. I'll see you soon.